Every morning at Thomas's Battersea, a private school in South London, children arrive with backpacks and lunchboxes. They laugh, they run. They are ordinary in every way except one. One of them is Princess Charlotte, and outside her classroom door, a man stands perfectly still. He wears a dark suit. His eyes never stop moving. His hand rests near his waistband, where something heavy sits beneath the fabric. He doesn't smile. He doesn't chat with teachers. He simply watches. The other parents notice him. They whisper when they drop off their children. Some find it reassuring. Others find it unsettling. But no one questions it anymore. Because 2 years ago, something happened that changed everything. If you're curious about untold stories like this, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. It started with a letter, not an email, not a phone call. A handwritten letter delivered to Kensington Palace in an unmarked envelope. The palace receives thousands of letters every week. Most are fan mail, some are complaints, a few are bizarre. This one was different. It contained no return address, no signature. Just 11 words written in block letters with a black marker. I know where she goes to school. I know her schedule. The palace security team read it once, then again, then a third time, with hands that trembled just slightly. Because the letter included a photograph. It was a photo of Princess Charlotte. She was walking out of her school building, holding hands with her nanny. The photo had been taken from across the street, zoomed in, clear enough to see the pattern on her school sweater. Whoever sent this had been watching. The head of royal protection, a man named David Marshall, stood in his office that evening with the letter in a plastic evidence bag. He had served in the British Special Forces. He had protected diplomats in war zones. He had trained for every threat imaginable. But this made his stomach turn. Children were the line. They were always the line. He picked up the phone and called the Metropolitan Police Counterterrorism Unit. Then he called I-5. Then he made a call directly to Prince William. The conversation lasted for minutes. When it ended, William sat in silence, staring at nothing. His wife, Catherine, placed a hand on his shoulder. "What do we do?" she asked quietly. William's jaw tightened. "We keep her safe, whatever it takes." Within 48 hours, a full security assessment was underway. The school was swept for vulnerabilities. Every staff member was revetted. New cameras were installed at every entrance. Patrol routes around the building were doubled, and a decision was made. Princess Charlotte would have a close protection officer assigned to her, not just nearby, not just on campus, right outside her classroom door. The officer selected for this assignment was a woman named Sarah Hendricks. She was 34 years old. Former Royal Military Police. Expert in both armed and unarmed combat. She had protected government officials in Iraq and Afghanistan, but this was different. This wasn't a politician or a diplomat. This was a 7-year-old girl who liked ponies and ballet. On Sarah's first day, she arrived at the school before sunrise. She walked the perimeter. She memorized exits. She studied sight lines. She met with the headmaster, who looked pale and exhausted. "We've never had a situation like this," he admitted. "That's why I'm here," Sarah replied. When the children began arriving that morning, Sarah took her position outside Charlotte's classroom. She stood with her back to the wall, her eyes scanning every face, every movement, every shadow. Charlotte walked past her with barely a glance. To the princess, this was simply her new normal, but Sarah knew the truth. Somewhere out there, someone was watching. Someone who had already proven they could get close, and Sarah's job was to make sure they never got close again. Asterisk, the second letter arrived 6 days later. This time, it came to the school directly. The headmaster found it in the morning mail pile, mixed in with permission slips and fundraiser notices. Same block letters, same unmarked envelope. He opened it without thinking. His hands froze when he read the words inside. She wears a blue coat on Tuesdays. Her favorite lunch is pasta. She sits in the second row. The headmaster dropped the letter like it was burning. These weren't guesses. These were details. Specific, intimate details that only someone watching very carefully would know. The school went into lockdown mode. Parents were notified. Routines were changed. Charlotte's schedule became randomized. Some days she wore different clothes. Some days she ate lunch in a different room, Sarah Hendricks doubled her vigilance. She started arriving even earlier. Staying later, she studied every parent, every delivery driver, every gardener who came near the school grounds. The Metropolitan Police launched a full investigation. They analyzed the letters for DNA, fingerprints, anything. They pulled security footage from nearby streets. They interviewed neighbors. Nothing. Whoever was doing this knew how to stay invisible. At Kensington Palace, Prince William barely slept. He would wake in the middle of the night and check his phone, waiting for news. Catherine tried to stay calm for their children, but Sarah could see the fear in her eyes during drop-dash-offs. One morning, as Charlotte skipped into her classroom, Catherine lingered near Sarah. "Tell me honestly," Catherine said quietly. "How worried should we be?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "We're taking every precaution. Charlotte is safe." "That's not what I asked." Sarah met her eyes. "Whoever this is, they want attention. They want you to be afraid. That's a very different thing from someone who wants to cause harm. But you don't know that for certain." "No," Sarah admitted. "I don't." Catherine nodded slowly. She glanced through the classroom window at her daughter, who was laughing with friends, completely unaware of the storm swirling around her. "She asked me yesterday why you're always standing outside her room," Catherine said. "She wanted to know if you were bored." Despite everything, Sarah smiled slightly. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you were making sure everyone stayed safe. She asked if that meant you were like a superhero, and what did you say?" I said yes. The two women stood in silence for a moment. Then Catherine touched Sarah's arm gently. "Thank you for everything you're doing." After she left, Sarah returned to her post. The hallway was quiet. Through the door, she could hear Charlotte's teacher beginning the morning lesson. Everything seemed normal, but Sarah's instincts were screaming that something was wrong that afternoon. During recess, Sarah noticed something unusual. There was a man standing across the street from the school playground. He wore a gray jacket and jeans. He held a phone, pointed toward the children. Sarah's hand moved to her radio instantly. Possible threat. East perimeter, gray jacket. Recording. Within 90 seconds, two plainclothes officers were moving toward the man from different directions. Sarah kept her position, her body angled between Charlotte and the fence. The man noticed the officers. He lowered his phone, started walking away too quickly. The officers closed in. One called out, "Sir, we need to have a word." The man broke into a run. It was over in less than 30 seconds. The officers tackled him on the sidewalk 2 blocks away. Students on the playground heard nothing, saw nothing, but Sarah saw everything. When the man was searched, they found his phone filled with photos. Dozens of photos. All of Princess Charlotte, playing, laughing, running. There were also screenshots, messages to online groups, forums where people obsessed over the royal family, posts about Charlotte's schedule, discussions about getting closer. The man was a 30-year-old American tourist named Marcus Webb. He had been in London for 2 weeks, claimed he was just a fan, just interested in royal history. But his hotel room told a different story. They found notebooks, timelines, maps of the area around the school, more photos, printed and pinned to the wall, and they found drafts. Multiple drafts of letters, block letters, black marker. The same letters that had been sent to the palace and the school. When David Marshall called Prince William that evening with the news, there was a long silence on the line. "Is he the one?" William finally asked. "We believe so. He's being questioned now." Another pause. "And Charlotte, she never knew anything was happening." Sarah made sure of that. William exhaled slowly. "I want to thank her personally. I'll arrange it." But even as the investigation continued, even as Marcus Webb sat in a holding cell being interrogated, Sarah couldn't shake a feeling. Something still felt wrong. Because when they searched Webb's belongings, they found something else. A burner phone. With one unsent message typed out, "I'm not alone." 3 words on a phone screen changed everything. "I'm not alone." The interrogation of Marcus Webb lasted 8 hours. He was cocky at first, dismissive. He claimed his rights as an American citizen. He demanded a lawyer. He insisted he hadn't done anything illegal. Taking photos in public isn't a crime, he said smugly. The lead investigator. Detective Inspector Rachel Vaughn slid the burner phone across the table, then explained this. Webb's face went pale. I want my lawyer now. But it was too late. The damage was done. That single unsent message opened a door that MI5 had been trying to find for weeks, because when they traced the phone's history, they discovered something chilling. Marcus Webb had been in contact with 7 other people, all over the world, Germany, France, Australia, Canada, all obsessed with the royal family, all sharing information about Princess Charlotte. This wasn't just one disturbed man. This was a network. They called themselves the Royal Watchers. At first, investigators thought it was just a fan group. Strange, perhaps, but not necessarily dangerous. Online communities about famous families exist everywhere. But as they dug deeper, they found private forums, encrypted chats, conversations that went far beyond admiration. They were planning something. One message from a user in Germany read, "The time is coming. We've waited long enough." Another from France, "I'll be in London next month. Finally get to see her in person." The Canadian user had posted, "Has anyone confirmed the new route yet?" Sarah Hendricks sat in a briefing room at Scotland Yard, reading through printed transcripts of these messages. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago. Her hands were steady, but her jaw was tight. David Marshall stood at the front of the room, his face grave. "We're treating this as a credible, coordinated threat," he said. "Every person in this network is now under investigation. International agencies have been notified. How many are there?" Someone asked. "At least 12 that we've identified. Possibly more." The room fell silent. Sarah spoke up. "What's their endgame? What do they actually want?" David hesitated. "We don't know yet. Some seem content just to observe. Others," he paused, "others have discussed abduction scenarios." The word hung in the air like poison. One of the MI5 agents leaned forward. "Are we pulling Charlotte from school?" "That decision is being discussed at the highest levels," David replied. "But if we pull her, we signal that they've won, that they can control us through fear. And if we don't?" Sarah asked quietly. David met her eyes. "Then we make absolutely certain nothing happens to her." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her small flat, staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios. Entry points. Response times. Worst-case situations. Her phone buzzed. A text from David. "Meeting at the palace tomorrow. 7 a.m. Prince William wants to see you." The next morning, Sarah walked through the halls of Kensington Palace feeling surreal. She had protected important people before, but this was different. This was history. This was a family whose every moment was watched by millions. She was led to a private sitting room. Prince William stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the gardens. He turned when she entered. He looked tired, older than his years. "Officer Hendricks. Thank you for coming, Your Royal Highness." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit, and you can call me William in here." Sarah sat, though every instinct told her to remain standing. William sat across from her. For a long moment, he just looked at her. "I understand you were the one who spotted Marcus Webb," he said. "I was doing my job, sir." "You did more than that. You protected my daughter without her ever knowing she was in danger. That's—" He paused, his voice catching slightly. "That's everything a parent could ask for." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. William leaned forward. "They tell me there are more people. That this isn't over?" "That's correct. How bad is it?" Sarah had been asked to be careful with what she shared, to not alarm the family unnecessarily. But sitting here, looking at a father who just wanted his child safe, she couldn't lie. "It's serious," she said honestly. "But we're doing everything possible to identify and stop them." William closed his eyes briefly. "Charlotte asked me yesterday why you're always outside her door. Why you never smile. What did you tell her?" "I told her you take your job very seriously. That you're there to make sure all the children are safe." He smiled faintly. She said that must be boring. Despite everything, Sarah smiled too. It has its moments. William's expression grew serious again. I need to know something. And I need you to be completely honest. Can you keep her safe? Sarah had been trained never to make promises she couldn't keep. In protection work, there are too many variables, too many unknowns. But she looked at this father, this man who lived his life in the public eye and couldn't even send his daughter to school without fear. And she gave him the only answer she could. I will give my life to protect her if necessary. That's not bravado. That's a promise. William's eyes glistened. He nodded once, sharply. Then that's all I can ask. As Sarah left the palace, she received an alert on her phone. Another member of the Royal Watchers. It's been spotted in London. This one had a criminal record, assault, stalking, and according to flight records, he had purchased a ticket 3 weeks ago. The same week Charlotte's school year had started. He was already here. His name was Klaus Becker. 42 years old. German national. A history of mental illness and violent behavior. And according to his phone records, he had been in London for 9 days. The Metropolitan Police moved quickly. They traced his hotel. A small, run-down place in East London. When they arrived with a warrant, the manager led them to room 214. The door was unlocked. Inside, they found a room that made even experienced investigators go quiet. The walls were covered in photos. Hundreds of them. Not just of Princess Charlotte, but of Prince George too. And little Prince Louis. Printed images, newspaper clippings, screenshots from social media accounts, but it was the map that made them call for backup. A detailed street map of the area around Thomas's Battersea. Red circles marked the school, the nearby park, the coffee shop where parents sometimes waited during drop-off, and there were notes, handwritten, in German, broken English. Tuesday, blue route. Thursday, different car. Why? Guard, woman, always watching. Problem. Ain't that last word was underlined 3 times. Detective Inspector Vaughn photographed everything. Her partner, a younger officer named James Chen, stood by the window. He's been watching for over a week, James said. Why hasn't he made a move? Because he's patient, Rachel replied. And that makes him more dangerous. They seized everything in the room. Laptops, phones, notebooks. But Klaus Becker himself was nowhere to be found at the school. Sarah received the update via encrypted text. She read it twice. Then she looked down the hallway where Charlotte's classroom sat. Door closed, lessons continuing as normal. Her hand moved to her earpiece. Control, this is Hendricks. I need additional units on site. Now, within 20 minutes, there were 4 more plainclothes officers positioned around the school. 2 on the perimeter. 2 inside, the headmaster was informed. His face went ashen. Should we evacuate? He asked. No, Sarah said firmly. We keep everything normal. The moment we change behavior, we signal that we know. And if he's watching, that could trigger him to act. And if he's already here, Sarah's eyes hardened. Then he'll have to go through me. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Every sound made Sarah's hand drift toward her concealed weapon. Every person who walked down the hallway was assessed, categorized, cleared. Lunch came and went. Recess happened under the watchful eyes of 6 armed officers disguised as groundskeepers and maintenance workers. Charlotte played hopscotch. She laughed with her friends. She remained beautifully, blissfully unaware. As the school day ended and parents began arriving for pickup, Sarah's radio crackled. Possible visual. North side, male gray jacket. Similar build. Sarah's pulse quickened. Do not engage. Confirm ID first. She moved to a window that gave her a view of the north entrance. There, a man, tall, dark hair. Watching the children as they emerged from the building, her hand keyed the radio. All units. Hold position. Wait for confirmation. 2 officers moved closer, using parked cars as cover. One pretended to check his phone. The other knelt to tie his shoe. Both were within sprinting distance. The man pulled out his phone, started to raise it, Sarah's body tinned. Then a woman approached him. She smiled. He smiled back. They kissed briefly. He was someone's husband. Waiting for his own child, Sarah exhaled slowly. False alarm. Stand down. But her relief lasted only seconds, because her phone buzzed with a message from MI5 Klaus. Becker's phone had just pinged a cell tower. Less than half a mile from the school. He was close. Very close. Sarah made a decision. She radioed Catherine's protection officer. Change of plans. I'm personally escorting Princess Charlotte to the vehicle. Stay with her, Royal Highness. She moved quickly to Charlotte's classroom. The teacher looked up, surprised to see Sarah entering. It's time for pickup, Sarah said calmly. I'll be walking Charlotte out today. Charlotte looked up from packing her bag. Are you my escort today? I am, Sarah said, crouching down to her level. We're going to walk together, okay? Okay? Charlotte seemed delighted by this change in routine. They walked down the hallway together. Sarah's eyes never stopped moving. Every door. Every window. Every corner. Outside, Catherine's car was waiting. The driver was one of their most trusted officers. 2 more vehicles flanked it, filled with armed protection. Sarah opened the door. Quick, hop in, Charlotte. Charlotte climbed in, waving at her mother, who waited inside. Catherine's eyes met Sarah's over her daughter's head. No words were needed. The door closed. The convoy pulled away. Sarah watched until the vehicles turned the corner and disappeared from view. Her radio crackled. Hendricks, we've got him. Klaus Becker. Half a block west. Moving toward the school, Tara's head snapped around. Intercept now. She couldn't leave her post, but every muscle in her body wanted to run toward the threat. To end this, through her earpiece, she heard everything. Subject spotted. Gray jacket. Black bag. Back contents unknown. Approaching with caution, Sir Metropolitan Police. We need you to stop. A pause. Then, he's running. Sarah's heart hammered. She heard footsteps, shouting, the sounds of a brief struggle. Then, subject in custody. Repeat, subject in custody. Sarah closed her eyes for just a moment. When they searched Klaus Becker's bag, they found rope. Zip ties, a knife, and a printed schedule. Charlotte's schedule. Every movement. Every routine. He had been planning an abduction, but he never got within 100 feet of her that night.
Ow.
In the interrogation room, Klaus Becker sat in silence. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't explain, just stared at the wall with empty eyes. But his phone told the story. Messages to the others in the Royal Watchers. Plans, timelines, discussions. About ransom demands. They had been coordinating for months, and if Sarah hadn't been there, if she hadn't been watching, if she hadn't been standing outside that classroom door every single day. The detectives didn't want to think about what might have happened. But Sarah knew, and it was that knowledge that would keep her standing. Outside that classroom door, for as long as Charlotte needed her there, asterisk. The arrest of Klaus Becker made international news for exactly 6 hours. Then the palace made a single phone call, and the story disappeared. No headlines, no photographs, no speculation. The public knew nothing about the Royal Watchers, about the letters, about how close danger had come to a 7-year-old girl. That was intentional, because MI5 had discovered something crucial. The network was larger than they thought. And if the members knew that Klaus had been arrested, that the operation had been compromised, they would scatter. So the news was suppressed. Klaus Becker became just another detained foreign national, lost in the system, and the investigation continued in silence. Over the next 2 weeks, international law enforcement moved carefully. They tracked every member of the Royal Watchers they could identify. They monitored communications. They built cases. In Berlin, a 36-year-old woman was arrested. Her apartment contained detailed files on the royal family's movements in Sydney. A man was detained at the airport attempting to board a flight to London. His luggage contained photos and floor plans. In Toronto, police discovered a storage unit rented under a false name. Inside were supplies, disguises, materials for creating fake identification. All of it pointed to the same conclusion. This group had been planning something for months, perhaps years. The question was, what exactly? David Marshall stood in a secure briefing room at MI5 headquarters, studying the evidence spread across the table. Rachel Vaughn stood beside him. "Doesn't make sense," she said. "Abduction for ransom? They're all obsessive fans. They claim to love the royals." "Love and obsession are dangerous neighbors," David replied. "Sometimes they blur together until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins." He picked up a printed message from the encrypted chat logs. Listen to this. From the user in France, "She belongs with people who truly understand her importance. People who would treasure her the way she deserves." Rachel frowned. "That's not about ransom. No, it's about possession." The realization settled over both of them like cold water. "They wanted to take her," Rachel said quietly. "Not for money, not for politics. They wanted to keep her." David nodded grimly. And in their minds, they would be saving her, protecting her, loving her. It was perhaps the most disturbing motive of all. At the school, life continued under Sarah's watchful eye. Charlotte attended classes, played with friends, participated in school plays, but the routines had changed in subtle ways. Drop-off times varied, routes alternated. The number of security personnel increased. Though they remained invisible to casual observers, other parents sometimes asked questions. Why was security so tight? Had there been a threat? The school's official response was carefully crafted. "We take the safety of all our students seriously, nothing more." One afternoon during recess, Charlotte approached Sarah. It was unusual. The princess typically ignored her, the way children ignore furniture or walls. They're always there, so they become invisible. "I ask you something?" Charlotte said. Sarah crouched down to her level. "Of course. My friend Lily says you're here because people want to hurt me. Is that true?" Sarah's heart clenched. She had dreaded this conversation. She chose her words carefully. "I'm here because your parents want to make sure you're always safe. That's what parents do. They protect the people they love. But why do I need more protecting than other kids?" It was a fair question. A hard question, because sometimes, Sarah said gently, when people are special or important, others pay more attention to them. And my job is to make sure that attention stays friendly. Charlotte considered this. "Do you like standing outside my classroom?" Sarah smiled. "I like knowing you're safe. That makes standing here worth it. Don't you get bored?" "Sometimes. But boring is good. Boring means everything is okay." Charlotte nodded solemnly. Then, without warning, she hugged Sarah quickly before running back to her friends. Sarah stood slowly, blinking against the sudden tightness in her throat. That evening, she received a call from David Marshall. "We've made the last arrest," he said. "All 14 members of the Royal Watchers are now in custody across 6 countries. Sarah closed her eyes. "Is it over?" "The organized threat is neutralized. But—" He paused. "You know as well as I do that there will always be someone else. Another obsessed fan. Another threat. Different faces, same danger. So I stay. Yes. For as long as Charlotte is at that school, you stay. After the call ended, Sarah sat in her flat, thinking about the conversation with Charlotte. About the innocence in her questions. The simple logic of a child who couldn't understand why anyone would want to hurt her. And Sarah thought about all the things Charlotte would never know. The letters. The stalkers. The coordinated plot. The knife in Klaus Becker's bag. She would never know how close danger had come. That was Sarah's job. To stand between a child and the darkness. And to make sure the darkness never touched her. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the school before dawn, as always. She walked the perimeter, checked the exits, reviewed the day's schedule. When Charlotte arrived with her mother, she waved at Sarah through the car window. A small gesture. A child's wave? Sarah nodded back. Then Charlotte disappeared into her classroom. And Sarah took her position outside the door. She stood with her back to the wall, her eyes scanning, her hand near her weapon, silent, vigilant, waiting, because that's what guardians do. They wait for threats that might never come. They stand in doorways, watching for shadows. And when everyone else goes home, when the children are safe and the school is empty, they remain. Because somewhere, there is always someone watching. And as long as that's true, Sarah would be watching to * 3 months after the arrests, on a gray November morning. Something unexpected happened. Sarah was at her usual post. Outside Charlotte's classroom, when the headmaster approached with an unusual request, "Princess Charlotte would like to do a presentation," he said, "for her class, about people who help keep us safe." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "Like firefighters and police." "Yes, and also you." She specifically asked if you would be part of it. For a moment, Sarah didn't know what to say. "I don't think that's appropriate. I'm supposed to be invisible." "I know," the headmaster smiled gently, "but you're not invisible to her. And perhaps that's not entirely a bad thing." The presentation happened 2 days later. Charlotte stood at the front of her classroom, her voice clear and confident. She talked about firefighters who ran into burning buildings, doctors who healed people, police officers who caught bad guys. And then she pointed to Sarah, who stood just inside the doorway. "This is Sarah," Charlotte said. "She makes sure we're all safe at school. She stands outside our classroom every day." I asked her if she gets bored, and she said boring is good because it means everything is okay. The children turned to look at Sarah. 20 pairs of young eyes, curious and unafraid. One boy raised his hand. "Do you have a gun?" The teacher started to intervene, but Sarah raised a hand gently. "I have tools to keep people safe," she said carefully. "But the most important tool is being alert and paying attention." Another child asked, "What's the scariest thing that ever happened?" Sarah paused. She thought about Klaus Becker, the knife, the rope, how close he had been, but she smiled and said, "Once a wasp flew into my ear." "That was pretty scary." The children laughed. The tension broke, and Charlotte beamed with pride. After the presentation, Catherine arrived for pickup. She lingered, watching Charlotte gather her things. "She talks about you at home," Catherine said quietly to Sarah, "when she grows up. She wants to help keep people safe, too." Sarah felt something catch in her chest. She has a good heart. She does. And that's because she's surrounded by people who show her what goodness looks like. Catherine's eyes were bright with emotion. You've given her something precious. Not just safety, but the feeling of safety. The ability to be a child without fear. That's the job. It's more than that. It's a gift. As the months passed, the threat of the Royal Watchers faded into classified files and sealed court records. Most members received prison sentences. Some were deported. Klaus Becker was placed in a psychiatric facility, but Sarah remained. She stood outside Charlotte's classroom through winter snow and spring rain. She was there for school plays and field trips. She learned to recognize the sound of Charlotte's laugh, the pattern of her footsteps. Other children began to wave at her. Parents nodded respectfully. She became part of the school's fabric, constant presence that represented security without creating fear. One warm afternoon in May, Charlotte emerged from class with a piece of paper in her hand. She walked straight to Sarah. "I made this for you," she said, holding out a drawing. It showed a stick figure in black standing next to a smaller figure with yellow hair. Above them, Charlotte had written in careful letters, "My friend Sarah, who keeps us safe." Sarah took the drawing, her throat suddenly tight. "This is beautiful. Thank you. You can keep it. If you want." "Do you want?" "Very much." Charlotte smiled, then ran off to meet her mother. That evening, Sarah hung the drawing in her flat. She stood looking at it for a long time. This simple piece of paper, created by a child who had no idea she had ever been in danger, who believed the world was a safe place because people like Sarah made it so. It was why she did this job, not for recognition or glory, but for moments like these, for the ability to give a child their childhood. David Marshall called that night. "I wanted to let you know," he said. "The last member of the Royal Watchers was sentenced today. 20 years. Good. The palace wants to review the security arrangements. They're considering reducing the visible presence. Sarah's stomach tightened. Is that wise? The organized threat has been eliminated. And there are concerns about Charlotte having a normal school experience. Normal doesn't mean safe. I know. That's why I wanted your opinion. You're the one who's been there every day. Sarah looked at the drawing on her wall. At the stick figure, standing next to the little girl with yellow hair. There will always be threats, she said finally. Maybe not organized, maybe not immediate, but people will always be watching her, always wanting something from her, and she's still just a child. So you recommend maintaining current protocols? I recommend doing whatever keeps her safest, while letting her be as normal as possible. If that means I stand outside her door for the next 5 years, then that's what I do. There was a pause. Then David said quietly, Thank you, Sarah, for everything. It's the job. No, it's more than that. After the call, Sarah sat in the quiet of her flat. She thought about all the days ahead, the mornings at dawn, the hours of standing, the constant vigilance. Some might find it boring, tedious, waste of training and skill. But Sarah understood, something that others didn't. The most important victories are the ones that never make headlines, the disasters that don't happen, the children who grow up safe and unaware of the shields that protected them. She thought about Charlotte's question. Don't you get bored? The answer was yes. Sometimes she did, but she would stand there bored for 1,000 days if it meant Charlotte could laugh with her friends, do her homework, and complain about tests like a normal little girl. Because somewhere in the world, there would always be someone watching, someone obsessed, someone who saw a princess instead of a child. And as long as that was true, Sarah would be there too, standing outside the classroom, silent, vigilant, the guard who waits, not for glory, not for recognition, but for the simple joy of a child who draws stick figures and believes the world is safe. That was enough. That was everything. And when Charlotte finally graduated from Thomas's Battersea years later, when she moved on to secondary school with new guards and new challenges, Sarah would carry that drawing with her, a reminder of why she did what she did. A reminder that sometimes the greatest heroism is simply standing between innocence and darkness, day after day, asking for nothing in return, because that's what guardians do. They wait, they watch, they protect, and they never, ever leave their post?